At the very beginning of Mesopotamian myth, before cities rose and before kings carved their names into stone, there was only the hush of waters. The ancients imagined two immense forces drifting in the void: Apsu, the deep freshwater abyss, and Tiamat, the boundless salt sea. Together they mingled silently, forming the primordial soup from which all things would eventually emerge. This dawn was not a sunrise, but a slow awakening. The first gods were not gentle figures. They were giants, embodiments of forces too vast for mortals to comprehend. They stirred in the darkness, heavy and inevitable, their presence explaining the floods, storms, and mysteries of the natural world. The younger gods, born from this union, were restless and loud, disturbing the stillness of the abyss. Their noise set the stage for conflict, for the first divine family drama, where order and chaos would clash. In this tension, the Mesopotamians found meaning. The universe itself was born from struggle, and the first giant gods were the architects of existence. The dawn of the first gods was less about light breaking over the horizon and more about realizing that the cosmos was crowded with enormous, noisy deities. It was the beginning of myth, the first attempt to explain why rivers flooded, why storms raged, and why life itself seemed both fragile and unstoppable. And now, in the most modern, sleepy blessing to end this opening tale, like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments from where you're watching, preferably while half asleep, so your answer is extra funny. Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates, was more than geography. It was the foundation of human order. The rivers carved out fertile plains, but they also carried destruction, flooding fields, and sweeping away homes without warning. This constant tension between life and chaos forced people to adapt, and in adapting, they built the first great cities, invented writing, and raised temples that reached toward the heavens. It was here that the earliest laws were written, calendars devised, and trade networks established. Clay tablets recorded everything from grain rations to cosmic myths. Each wedge-shaped mark a small attempt to bring order to the unpredictable world. Ziggurats rose above the plains, massive stepped structures that served as both temples and symbols of human ambition. Each brick was laid with ritual care, each level imagined as a step closer to the gods. The myths of the Titans were inseparable from this landscape. Floods were explained as Tiamat stirring in her watery chaos, while the bubbling of springs was seen as Apsu breathing beneath the earth. Farmers, priests, and kings alike lived with the belief that the immense forces shaping their world were embodied in giant gods. These myths were not idle stories. They were explanations, reassurances, and warnings woven into the rhythm of daily life. Mesopotamia thrived, but it was fragile. Cities rose and fell, empires expanded and collapsed, and yet the stories endured. The cradle of civilization was also the cradle of myth, where the first giant gods were imagined into being, larger than life and inseparable from the rivers that sustained and threatened the people. In this balance of chaos and order, humanity found both its greatest challenges and its earliest sense of meaning. Before the first cities rose, and before the gods were neatly arranged in temples, Mesopotamian myth began with chaos. This chaos was not noise or disorder in the human sense, but a vast, endless expanse of waters without shape or boundary. The ancients imagined two immense forces drifting in the void: Apsu, the deep freshwater abyss, and Tiamat, the boundless salt sea. Together they mingled silently, forming the primordial soup from which all things would eventually emerge. In this vision, the world had no sky, no land, no light. It was a heavy darkness, a timeless state where nothing yet existed but potential. The Mesopotamians explained this as the womb of creation, a place where the first stirrings of life and divinity were waiting to be born. Out of this mingling came the younger gods, restless and noisy, their energy disturbing the stillness of the abyss. The primordial chaos was both feared and revered. It represented the unpredictable floods that swept across fields, the storms that broke suddenly, and the mysteries of the deep waters that sustained life yet threatened destruction. To the people of Mesopotamia, chaos was not simply an enemy. It was the raw material of existence, the giant force that had to be shaped into order. This idea of chaos as the beginning gave meaning to their world. Every temple, every law, every ritual was an attempt to hold back the return of disorder. The myths reminded them that the universe itself was born from conflict, that the first gods were giants who embodied forces too vast for mortals to control. The primordial chaos was the stage, the silent backdrop against which the drama of creation unfolded. It was the reminder that before order there was only the endless sea, and within that sea the first giant gods stirred, waiting to shape the world. In Mesopotamian myth, Apsu was the embodiment of the hidden freshwater abyss, the silent reservoir beneath the earth from which springs and rivers flowed. He was imagined as vast and eternal, a giant presence that sustained life yet remained unseen. To the people of Mesopotamia, Apsu was not simply water. He was the deep foundation of existence, the quiet force that nourished fields and quenched thirst. Apsu's role in the myths was both nurturing and threatening. He represented stability, the calm depths that supported creation. But he also grew weary of the younger gods who disturbed his rest with their noise and ambition. In the Enuma Elish, he plotted to silence them, a reminder that even the life-giving waters could turn against those who failed to respect their power. His presence explained the mysteries of the natural world. Wells that bubbled unexpectedly were signs of Apsu stirring. Rivers that vanished or swelled without warning were his moods made manifest. Farmers and priests alike saw him as a force to be honored, for without his blessing, the land would wither. Though overshadowed in later myths by Tiamat's chaos and Marduk's triumph, Apsu remained a symbol of the unseen depths. He was the quiet giant, the god whose waters lay beneath the surface, sustaining life. In the imagination of Mesopotamia, Apsu was the deep breath of the earth, the silent abyss from which all things began, and the reminder that even the calmest waters hold immense power. In Mesopotamian myth, Tiamat was the vast salt sea, the embodiment of primordial chaos, and one of the most formidable figures in the pantheon. She was imagined as immense, stretching across the horizon. Her body, a dragon-like form with scales that shimmered like waves and eyes that burned with storm. To the people of Mesopotamia, she was not simply a goddess, but the living force of disorder, the mother of monsters who threatened the fragile balance of the world. Tiamat's role was both creative and destructive. From her union with Apsu came the younger gods, noisy and ambitious, who disturbed the stillness of the abyss. When Apsu was slain by these younger gods, Tiamat's fury erupted. She gathered her strength and birthed an army of terrifying creatures, serpents with venomous fangs, scorpion men with stingers poised, storm demons, and dragon-like beasts. These monsters were her children, her soldiers, her embodiment of chaos unleashed. Her battle with Marduk became the centerpiece of the Enuma Elish. Marduk, armed with net, bow, and spear, faced Tiamat in a cosmic struggle. The clash was described as thunderous, a war between order and chaos. In the end, Marduk split Tiamat's body in two, stretching one half to form the heavens and the other to form the earth. From her blood, humanity was fashioned, a reminder that even in destruction, creation could emerge. Tiamat was feared, but she was also respected. She represented the unpredictable floods, the storms that broke suddenly, and the wild forces of nature that could not be controlled. Her presence explained the dangers of the world, but also its vitality. Without her chaos, there could be no order. Without her destruction, there could be no creation. In the imagination of Mesopotamia, Tiamat was the mother of monsters, the giant goddess whose defeat gave birth to the world itself. She was chaos personified, a reminder that the universe began not with peace, but with conflict, and that even the most terrifying forces could be transformed into the foundations of life. From the mingling of Apsu's deep waters and Tiamat's boundless sea came the first stirrings of divine life. The Mesopotamians imagined this moment not as a gentle dawn, but as a noisy eruption. When the younger gods burst forth from the primordial abyss, these new beings were immense, their size and power reflecting the forces that had created them. They were the first giant gods, embodiments of chaos and order, struggling to find balance. The myths describe them as restless, filling the universe with sound and movement. Their presence disturbed Apsu, who longed for silence, and enraged Tiamat, who saw their ambition as a threat. Yet their birth was inevitable, for the world itself could not remain in stillness forever. Creation required conflict, and conflict required giants. These gods were not yet the familiar figures of later pantheons. They were raw, elemental, larger than life. Some embodied the sky, others the winds, others the storms. Together they formed a divine family whose quarrels mirrored the struggles of humanity. Their immense size was a way of explaining the overwhelming forces of nature: floods, droughts, tempests, and earthquakes. The birth of the first giant gods marked the beginning of mythic history. It was the moment when chaos gave way to form, when the universe began to take shape through the clash of titanic beings. For the people of Mesopotamia, these stories explained why the world was both ordered and unpredictable, both nurturing and destructive. The giants were not simply characters in a tale. They were the living forces behind existence. Their birth was the first step in the long saga of gods and mortals, a reminder that the universe itself was born from giants too vast to ignore. Among the pantheon of Mesopotamian deities, few groups carried as much mystery and weight as the Anunnaki. They were not single figures like Apsu or Tiamat, but a collective of gods, often described as judges, rulers, and overseers of both heaven and earth. Their name itself carried the sense of authority, suggesting beings who were descended from the heavens, yet deeply tied to the fate of humanity. The Annunaki were imagined as immense, towering presences, sometimes depicted as giants who sat in council to decide the destinies of mortals. They were said to dwell in the underworld as well as in the heavens, bridging the gap between chaos and order. In myths, they appeared as arbiters of justice, weighing the deeds of humans and determining outcomes that shaped life and death. Their role was not uniform. Different cities and traditions gave them different functions. In some accounts, they were the children of Anu, the sky god, and served as his emissaries. In others, they were linked to Enlil, the god of air and authority, acting as his council of divine advisors. What remained constant was their immense size and power, qualities that made them the embodiment of divine hierarchy. The Anunnaki explained the unseen forces of law and destiny, just as floods and storms were attributed to Tiamat, the rise and fall of kings, the success of harvests, and the fate of souls were attributed to the decisions of these giant gods. They were the divine bureaucracy, the cosmic court, the reminder that even the gods required order to govern the universe. For the people of Mesopotamia, the Anunnaki were both awe-inspiring and intimidating. They were not worshipped in the same way as personal gods of fertility or war, but they were respected as the ultimate arbiters. Their presence in myth reinforced the idea that life was subject to forces larger than any individual, forces that could not be bribed or swayed, only acknowledged. In the long saga of Mesopotamian mythology, the Anunnaki stood as the council of giants, the divine judges whose decisions shaped the destiny of gods and mortals alike. In the Mesopotamian imagination, the first giant gods were not confined to one realm. They stretched across both heaven and earth, their immense size and power making them rulers of the cosmos itself. These beings were described as towering presences, embodiments of forces that shaped the world above and the land below. The giants were not gentle overseers. They were forces of nature, given divine form, their authority extending from the skies to the depths. Storms, floods, and earthquakes were seen as their movements, while the stability of the heavens and the fertility of the earth were signs of their favor. To mortals, they were both protectors and threats, capable of sustaining life or sweeping it away without warning. Their rule was imagined as a balance between chaos and order. Some giants embodied the destructive power of nature, while others represented the structure needed to keep the universe intact. Together they formed a hierarchy that governed the cosmos, a divine system where size equaled authority. Kings and priests looked to these giants as models of power. Just as the gods ruled heaven and earth, rulers claimed to govern their cities with divine mandate. Temples and ziggurats were built as earthly reflections of the giants' cosmic rule, rising toward the sky while rooted in the soil. The giants who ruled heaven and earth were more than mythic figures. They were explanations for the overwhelming forces that shaped human life. Their immense presence reminded the people of Mesopotamia that the universe was vast, unpredictable, and governed by powers far beyond mortal control. In Mesopotamian myth, the gods were not imagined as modest figures. They were immense, towering presences whose very size reflected their authority. To the people living between the rivers, the overwhelming forces of nature could only be explained by beings of colossal scale. Floods that swallowed villages, storms that shook the skies, and earthquakes that split the earth were seen as the movements of giant gods whose power was beyond human comprehension. Divine power was measured not only in strength, but in magnitude. A god's size was a symbol of their reach, stretching across heaven and earth, embodying forces that mortals could neither resist nor ignore. Tiamat's monstrous form, vast as the sea itself, and Apsu's endless depths were reminders that the universe was shaped by giants. Even the younger gods, though less chaotic, were imagined as immense, their presence filling the cosmos with sound and motion. This sense of scale carried into human society. Kings claimed their authority by comparing themselves to the gods, presenting their rule as a reflection of divine power. Temples and ziggurats were built to mirror this immensity, rising above the plains as earthly echoes of the gods' towering presence. The architecture itself was a statement. Just as the gods were vast, so too must human devotion be monumental. The myths reinforced the idea that size equaled importance. The larger the god, the greater their influence, and the more essential their role in maintaining balance between chaos and order. For the Mesopotamians, divine immensity was not simply a detail of storytelling. It was a way of understanding the scale of the universe itself. In the imagination of Mesopotamia, the gods were giants because the world was overwhelming. Their immense size was the measure of their power, a reminder that humanity lived in the shadow of forces too vast to control, yet too essential to ignore. The myths of Mesopotamia tell of a time when the universe itself trembled under the weight of divine conflict. The younger gods, noisy and ambitious, had disturbed the stillness of the abyss, and in their rebellion they struck down Apsu, the god of the deep waters. His death enraged Tiamat, the salt sea, who rose in fury to avenge him. Thus began the War of the Elder Gods, a cosmic struggle between chaos and order, between the primordial giants and the new generation of deities. Tiamat gathered her strength and birthed an army of terrifying creatures. Serpents with venomous fangs, scorpion men with stingers raised, storm demons, and dragon-like beasts filled her ranks. These monsters were not mere symbols. They were embodiments of chaos itself, unleashed to overwhelm the younger gods. Her presence was vast, her body stretching across the horizon, her roar echoing like thunder. The younger gods, fearful of her power, turned to Marduk, a rising figure among them. He was clever, resourceful, and ambitious, willing to face the chaos that others dared not confront. Armed with net, bow, and spear, he prepared for battle, organizing the divine forces with precision. The war was described as thunderous, a clash that shook the heavens and churned the seas. The conflict was more than mythic drama. It was the Mesopotamian explanation for the unpredictable forces of nature. Floods, storms, and disasters were seen as echoes of this cosmic war, reminders that chaos was never fully defeated, only contained. The War of the Elder Gods symbolized the eternal struggle between destruction and creation, a cycle that defined the universe. In the end, Marduk triumphed, splitting Tiamat's body in two and shaping the heavens and the earth from her remains. Yet the memory of the war lingered, etched into clay tablets and whispered in rituals. It was a reminder that the world itself was born from conflict, that order was carved out of chaos, and that the giants of Mesopotamia had once ruled with terrifying power. The War of the Elder Gods reached its climax when Marduk, the ambitious champion of the younger generation, stepped forward to face Tiamat and her monstrous army. Unlike the primordial giants who embodied raw chaos, Marduk represented the emerging order of the universe. He was armed not only with weapons, but with strategy, determination, and the promise of reshaping the cosmos itself. Marduk prepared carefully for the battle. He fashioned a great net to trap Tiamat, a bow, and arrows to pierce her vast body, and a spear to deliver the final blow. He also carried with him the winds, forces of nature that he commanded to swirl and buffet his enemy. The younger gods, fearful yet hopeful, granted him supreme authority, declaring that if he triumphed, he would become their leader. The clash was described as thunderous, a cosmic struggle that shook the heavens and churned the seas. Tiamat roared. Her monstrous children surged forward, and chaos seemed unstoppable. But Marduk's net ensnared her. The winds filled her body, and his arrow split her heart. With this act, the reign of the primordial giants ended, and the world was forever changed. From Tiamat's immense body, Marduk created the structure of the universe. He stretched one half to form the heavens, and the other to form the earth. He organized the stars, set the sun and moon in their courses, and established the calendar to measure time. Out of her blood, mixed with clay, humanity was fashioned, destined to serve the gods and maintain the order Marduk had won. The fall of the giants was not simply a mythic battle. It was the Mesopotamian explanation for why the world was orderly, yet born from chaos. Marduk's victory symbolized the triumph of structure over disorder, of civilization over the unpredictable forces of nature. The Titans of Mesopotamia were defeated, but their presence lingered in the very fabric of creation. In this tale, Marduk became the supreme deity, the ruler of gods and mortals alike. His triumph marked the end of the giants' dominance and the beginning of a new cosmic order, one that reflected the ambitions of kings and the hopes of civilizations rising between the rivers. The Mesopotamian vision of creation was not a gentle unfolding, but a dramatic act carved out of conflict. After Marduk's victory over Tiamat, the universe was reshaped from her immense body. Her vast form, once the embodiment of chaos, became the raw material of existence. Marduk split her in two. One half stretched upward to form the heavens, the other laid downward to become the earth. In this act, the cosmos was divided, structured, and given order. From her eyes flowed the rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, lifelines of Mesopotamia. From her tail came the constellations, guiding the passage of time. Her ribs became the mountains, her saliva the clouds, her blood mixed with clay to create humanity. Every element of the world was imagined as a fragment of the defeated giant goddess, transformed from chaos into stability. Marduk did not stop at shaping the physical world. He organized the heavens, assigning stars their places and setting the sun and moon in their courses. He established the calendar, dividing time into seasons, months, and days, ensuring that the rhythms of nature could be measured and predicted. What had once been unpredictable chaos was now a system, a cosmic order that mirrored the organization of human society. The creation of the world from chaos was more than myth. It was reassurance. It explained why the universe was structured yet born from conflict, why life was fragile yet enduring. It reminded the people of Mesopotamia that their world was built on the remains of giants, that even destruction could give birth to creation. In this vision, the cosmos was not a gift freely given, but a prize wrestled from chaos. The world itself was a monument to Marduk's triumph, a reminder that order was always hard-won, and that beneath the stability of rivers and fields lay the memory of titanic struggle. In Mesopotamian myth, humanity was not created after Marduk defeated Tiamat and shaped the heavens and the earth from her immense body. The younger gods faced a dilemma. They had one order from chaos, but maintaining that order required constant labor, building temples, keeping the rivers flowing, and ensuring the rhythms of the cosmos remained steady. The gods, powerful though they were, grew weary of endless toil. The solution was both practical and symbolic. From the blood of Kingu, Tiamat's chosen commander, mixed with clay, Marduk fashioned humankind. This act was deliberate. Humans were born from chaos and earth, carrying within them both the potential for disorder and the responsibility to uphold order. Their purpose was clear: to serve the gods, to take on the burdens of labor, and to maintain the structures that divine beings had no desire to manage themselves. For the people of Mesopotamia, this myth explained their place in the universe. Farming, building, and ritual were not merely human tasks. They were sacred duties, part of the cosmic plan. Every brick laid in a ziggurat, every offering placed on an altar, every canal dug to guide the rivers was seen as fulfilling humanity's role in the divine order. This vision of humanity was both humbling and empowering. Mortals were small compared to the giants who had shaped the world, yet they were essential. Without human labor, the gods would be burdened. Without human devotion, the balance between chaos and order would falter. Humanity was the bridge between the divine and the earthly. Born from the blood of rebellion, yet tasked with sustaining civilization. In the Mesopotamian imagination, humans were not accidents of creation, but instruments of purpose. They were the caretakers of the world, the servants of the gods, and the living reminder that even in the shadow of giants, mortals had a role to play in keeping the universe intact. In the heart of Mesopotamian cities, ziggurats rose like stairways to the heavens. These massive stepped structures were more than temples. They were symbols of humanity's devotion to the giant gods who ruled both heaven and earth. Each brick was laid with ritual care, each level imagined as a step closer to the divine. To the people, the ziggurat was a bridge between mortals and the colossal beings who shaped the cosmos. The worship of giants was woven into the daily rhythm of life. Priests ascended the ziggurat to offer sacrifices, believing that the towering gods required nourishment from human devotion. Rituals were performed to honor Apsu's deep waters, Tiamat's chaotic sea, and Marduk's triumph over the primordial forces. The ceremonies were not only acts of reverence, but also attempts to maintain balance, ensuring that chaos remained subdued and order preserved. Ziggurats themselves embodied the scale of the gods. Their immense size mirrored the immensity of divine power, reminding mortals that the universe was governed by forces far greater than themselves. Rising above the plains, they dominated the skyline, visible from miles away, a constant reminder of the giant's presence. For kings, the ziggurat was also a political symbol. By building and maintaining these sacred towers, rulers demonstrated their divine mandate, claiming to act as intermediaries between the gods and their people. The higher the ziggurat, the stronger the bond between heaven and earth, and the greater the king's authority. In the imagination of Mesopotamia, sacred ziggurats were not just monuments of stone and clay. They were living symbols of giant worship, places where mortals reached upward to honor the colossal beings who had shaped the world. Each ascent was a journey from earth to heaven, from human fragility to divine immensity. The giant gods of Mesopotamia once ruled the imagination of entire civilizations. Their stories explained floods, storms, and the mysteries of creation. Yet over time, their voices grew faint, their temples crumbled, and their names faded into obscurity. The reasons for this forgetting were woven into history itself. Shifting powers of empire as Mesopotamian cities rose and fell, Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, Assyria, each brought new gods to prominence. Local deities replaced older ones, and myths were rewritten to reflect the authority of new rulers. Marduk, for example, rose to supremacy in Babylon, overshadowing the primordial giants like Apsu and Tiamat. The rise of new religions, with the spread of Persian Zoroastrianism, and later Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the Mesopotamian pantheon was gradually displaced. The giant gods were seen as relics of paganism, their myths preserved only in fragments of clay tablets buried beneath the sands. Loss of language and culture cuneiform, the script that recorded these myths, eventually fell out of use. Without scribes to copy and preserve the stories, the myths of the giants slipped into silence. What was once sacred knowledge became unreadable symbols, forgotten until rediscovered by archaeologists thousands of years later. Transformation into symbol, even as the gods were forgotten, their essence lived on. Tiamat became a symbol of chaos in later traditions, while the idea of cosmic battles between order and disorder echoed in myths across cultures. The giants were not erased completely. They were transformed, absorbed into new stories and new faiths. The forgetting of these gods was not sudden but gradual, a fading of memory as civilizations changed and beliefs evolved. Yet their legacy remains. In the ruins of ziggurats, in the fragments of clay tablets, and in the echoes of myths retold across cultures, the giant gods of Mesopotamia still whisper of a time when chaos and order were embodied in beings too vast for mortals to ignore. The civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt were not isolated worlds. From the 4th millennium BCE onward, trade routes carried goods, people, and ideas between the fertile valleys of the Tigris-Euphrates and the Nile. Alongside copper, grain, and textiles, myths and symbols traveled, weaving connections between the two great cradles of civilization. Mesopotamian myths of primordial waters, embodied by Apsu and Tiamat, found echoes in Egyptian cosmology. The Egyptian god, Nun, representing the chaotic waters before creation, parallels Mesopotamian visions of the abyss. Both cultures imagined the universe emerging from watery chaos, shaped by divine struggle. Mesopotamian pantheons, with councils of gods like the Annunaki, influenced Egyptian ideas of divine order. Egyptian gods, such as Osiris, Ra, and Horus, were organized into family structures and cosmic hierarchies that mirrored Mesopotamian divine councils. Kingship in Egypt, like in Mesopotamia, was tied to divine mandate. Pharaohs were seen as mediators between gods and mortals, echoing Mesopotamian rulers who claimed authority through giant gods. Ziggurats in Mesopotamia and pyramids in Egypt both symbolized stairways to the divine. While their forms differed, the concept of monumental structures as bridges between heaven and earth reflected shared religious ideals. Sacrificial offerings, temple rituals, and cosmic calendars were influenced by Mesopotamian practices. The Egyptian emphasis on maintaining cosmic order resonates with Mesopotamian struggles to contain chaos through ritual and law. Though Egypt developed its own distinct mythology, the fingerprints of Mesopotamia remain visible. The idea of creation from chaos, divine councils, monumental worship, and cosmic order were all shaped by Mesopotamian precedents. Over centuries, these influences blended with local traditions, producing Egypt's unique but interconnected mythological system. The exchange between Mesopotamia and Egypt reminds us that myths were not confined by geography. They were living stories, carried across rivers and deserts, reshaped by new cultures, and preserved in temples and texts. The giant gods of Mesopotamia, though forgotten in their homeland, left echoes in the myths of the Nile. The mythology of ancient Greece did not emerge in isolation. Long before Hesiod composed the Theogony, the stories of Mesopotamia had already traveled westward through trade, migration, and cultural exchange. These tales of primordial chaos, giant gods, and cosmic battles left a deep imprint on Greek imagination, especially in the conception of the Titans. In Mesopotamian myth, Apsu and Tiamat embodied the waters of chaos, from which the younger gods emerged. In Greek myth, chaos and the primordial deities Gaia, Uranus, Nyx served a similar role, representing the raw forces before order. Both traditions begin with vast elemental beings, whose immense size and power explain the origins of the cosmos. The war between Marduk and Tiamat in the Enuma Elish mirrors the Titanomachy, the battle between Zeus and the Titans. In both myths, a younger generation of gods rises against the older, chaotic giants, defeating them to establish cosmic order. The defeated giants are not erased but transformed. Tiamat's body becomes the world, while the Titans are cast into Tartarus, shaping the boundaries of existence. Mesopotamian councils of gods, such as the Annunaki, influenced Greek ideas of divine assemblies on Mount Olympus. The notion of gods ruling through hierarchy and council reflects Mesopotamian precedents, where authority was distributed among powerful deities. The Mesopotamian giants embodied natural forces, floods, storms, earthquakes, just as the Greek Titans represented elemental domains, Oceanus, Hyperion, Cronus. Both cultures used giants to explain overwhelming forces of nature, giving them divine faces and mythic narratives. The Titans of Greece were not direct copies of Mesopotamian gods, but their stories carried echoes of Babylonian myth. The themes of chaos versus order, generational conflict, and the transformation of defeated giants into the fabric of the cosmos reveal a shared mythological heritage. Through cultural contact, Mesopotamian myths provided a framework that Greek poets reshaped into their own tradition. The Titans became uniquely Greek, yet their roots reached back to the giant gods of Mesopotamia, reminding us that myth is a living thread woven across civilizations. The memory of giants in Mesopotamian myth was not preserved only in oral tradition. It was carved into clay, pressed into tablets, and stored in temple libraries. These texts, written in cuneiform, remain some of the oldest surviving records of humanity's attempt to understand the cosmos. Within them, the giants appear as primordial forces, divine rulers, and monstrous beings whose immense size explained the overwhelming powers of nature. This Babylonian creation epic describes the battle between Marduk and Tiamat, the mother of monsters. Tiamat's vast body, split in two, became the heavens and the earth. Her defeat marked the fall of the primordial giants and the rise of cosmic order. The text portrays giants not as mere characters, but as the very fabric of creation. In this tale, the gods grow weary of labor and create humans from clay mixed with divine blood. The giants here are not directly named, but the echoes of primordial beings linger in the background. shaping the narrative of humanity's burden and purpose. While best known for its hero, Gilgamesh himself is described as two-thirds divine, a giant among mortals. His immense strength and stature reflect the lingering influence of giant mythology, showing how divine immensity could be embodied in human kings. Beyond epic poetry, temple records and ritual instructions often invoked the names of giant gods. Offerings, sacrifices, and prayers were directed toward these immense beings, reinforcing their role as guardians of cosmic balance. The tablets remind us that giants were not just stories told around fires. They were sacred truths inscribed for eternity. Each wedge of cuneiform carried the weight of belief, preserving the memory of colossal beings who ruled heaven and earth. Though the ziggurats have crumbled and the empires have fallen, the clay tablets endure. They whisper of a time when giants shaped the world, when chaos and order were embodied in beings too vast for mortals to ignore. The giant gods of Mesopotamia may have faded from temples and daily worship, but their legacy endures in ways both subtle and profound. These titans of the ancient Near East shaped not only the myths of their own people, but also influenced the stories, symbols, and structures of civilizations that followed. The cosmic battle between Marduk and Tiamat resonates in Greek tales of Zeus overthrowing the Titans, and in Norse myths of Odin confronting primordial giants. The theme of order rising from chaos became a universal motif, repeated across cultures as a way of explaining the origins of the world. Mesopotamian myths established the idea that rulers derived authority from divine mandate. This concept carried into Egyptian pharaohs, Persian kings, and even later empires. The Titans' immense size and power became archetypes for gods who embodied natural forces, reinforcing the link between divine immensity and human kingship. Though forgotten in daily worship, the stories of the Titans survived in clay tablets buried beneath ruins. Rediscovered by archaeologists in the 19th century, these texts revealed the depth of Mesopotamian cosmology and its impact on world mythology. The Enuma Elish and Epic of Gilgamesh remain foundational works, studied not only as literature, but as windows into humanity's earliest attempts to understand existence. The Titans live on in modern imagination, fantasy literature, role-playing games, and popular culture, often borrowed directly from Mesopotamian giants, reimagining them as dragons, primordial beings, or gods of chaos. Their stories remind us that myth is not static. It evolves, adapts, and continues to inspire across millennia. The legacy of the Mesopotamian Titans is not measured in temples or rituals, but in the persistence of their themes. They taught that the universe was born from conflict, that chaos and order are inseparable, and that humanity itself carries the burden of divine struggle. Though their names may be forgotten by most, their influence remains etched into the foundations of myth, religion, and culture. The Titans of Mesopotamia continue to whisper through history, reminding us that even the oldest stories still shape the way we see the world. In the quiet of night, when the world softens and the stars shimmer faintly above, the stories of the first gods return like whispers. Apsu, the deep waters, and Tiamat, the boundless sea, drift together in the primordial darkness. Their vast forms, once clashing in chaos, now seem to sway gently, like waves rocking the universe into rest. The younger gods, noisy and ambitious, fade into silence. The monsters birthed from fury dissolve into shadows. What remains is the stillness of creation, the memory of giants who shaped heaven and earth. Their immense presence becomes a lullaby, reminding mortals that even chaos can be quiet, even titans can rest. The ziggurats, once towering stairways to the divine, stand like dream pillars against the horizon. The clay tablets, etched with stories of battles and beginnings, seem to hum softly, as if the myths themselves are drifting into sleep. Humanity, born from clay and blood, lies beneath the watch of the stars, carrying the burden of order, but also the gift of dreams. In this moment, the first gods are not fierce or terrifying. They are gentle currents, cosmic guardians, who cradle the world in their vast embrace. The universe itself feels like a bed of waters, rocking mortals into slumber, carrying them back to the dawn where everything began. And so the tale closes, not with thunder or war, but with quiet. The giants rest, the gods drift, and the world exhales. The myths become dreams, and the dreams become sleep. Good night.